Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Over the decades, there have been many hundreds of gaming greats. Sadly, some of those gaming greats have become rather difficult to get working on modern-day computers, or they're just not available at all. Well, one gaming company decided to ensure that the gaming greats did not fall into the mists of history, and that company was Nightdive Studios. Over the years, they've released many gaming greats, such as Doom 64 and Shadow Man, and now they've turned their sights on Quake II.
Quake II was originally developed by id Software and published by Activision on December 9th, 1997, almost 26 years ago. Awesomely enough, the game has been pretty easy to get working on modern machines, at least up until Windows 7, and I remember just popping the disc in and it working just fine. It was also available on various content distribution platforms as well, such as Steam and GOG. There was even a console release of the original PC Quake II that came bundled with Quake IV. However, to get it working with better screen resolutions required mods, and some of those mods were a little finicky. Quake II Remastered was created by Nightdive Studios and published in 2023 by Bethesda for every current year system. The version we are looking at here is the Steam release. Like many of their remasters, Quake II does not use the original engine, but instead uses Nightdive's Kex engine, which means that Nightdive was no longer bound by the constraints of the original engine, and thus they were able to add in cut content and perform a little cleanup here and there. They keep the original Quake II experience intact and merely enhance it with elements that were beyond id Tech 2. The remaster is a complete bloody package too. You got the base Quake 2, you got the two expansions, including the one with the bastard turrets, the N64 version of Quake 2, which features levels both different and similar to the base Quake 2 game. Nightdive gives us a new episode entirely called Call of the Machine, an episode that is without a doubt the best first-person shooting I've had in nigh on 20 years. It features Quake II gameplay at its bloody finest. In addition to all that, we get some behind-the-scenes stuff, concept art, we get a kick-ass main menu theme. Oh yeah, all the bloody music works. We'll touch on that later. What also works is the multiplayer. Originally, you had to mod it to play against bots, but out of the box, you can fight Robros, and they will talk like they did in Quake 3. Fun fact, the bot dialogue in Quake 3 was written by the Chewbacca killer himself, R.A. Salvatore. Hence why those bots sound so fake. No multiplayer chat was ever that clean. Well, outside of SWTOR. For those who suffer from memory problems, Quake II was and is a first-person shooter of the god-tier variety. It perfects the id formula of constant, unending action. You get a massive number of excellent weapons, from the bombastic Hand of Talos, aka the Super Shotty, to the useful Machine and Pistola. What was neat in 1997 was how you got recoil with the Machine Pistol, something that had not really been seen before. You use these weapons to fight a wide variety of complex and fun to kill enemies that range from generic dudes to this bastard that has a machine gun and a grenade launcher. We got the centaur monster that loves to snipe with a railgun, and some unidentified flying bastards. This game's cyber demon equivalent is called a tank. The tank can tank a shit ton of damage, but were easy enough to kill in the original release. Nightdive was kind enough to fix that. They also fixed the Berserker enemy. They had a cut lunge attack, and Nightdive gave it back to them, so now they're even harder to bloody well kill. The game has a few bosses here and there, and they are a slightly greater challenge than they were in the original release. What made Quake II so bloody good was how the game challenges you with enemies and not health and ammo management. You will always, on normal at least, have plenty of health and ammo to take on the enemies, but you have to know how to fight the enemies and with what weapon. And the game never slows its pace at all. All the levels, while complex in layout, are fully straightforward, and you never have to do too much backtracking. The game will always funnel you to where you need to go, and the game does not ever force you into bloody arenas. You are always moving from point A to point B. All this combines to form a game where you just blast bastards until they all fall before you. The remaster ups the graphical complexity only a tiny bit, adds in some more advanced lighting, and redoes the cutscenes with new graphics, as the originals were in 240p and showed their age. Now about that new episode, Call of the Machine, truly it is a gift from the great Omnissiah himself. First, and most importantly, this episode does not suck. Instead, it advances the Quake II gameplay a little bit. In one of the sets of levels, you face shit tons of enemies, scads of enemies, bushels of enemies, a lot of bloody bastards. but the game gives you the tools to fight them. You get the BFG-10K in the first 5 seconds of one level, and this means you can be focused upon crowd control for a while. The levels can get a little bullshitty here and there, and they can get a little slow at times, but they're always keeping that pace up. And like with base Q2, you will always have the tools to fight, but you gotta bring that skill. If Call of the Machine were a standalone game, I would call it the greatest game of the bloody year for how fun it is. This was, and always will be, my kind of game. If you've not booted up Quake II in a while, or you think you have all the mods you will ever need and thus this release is superfluous like I did at first, I still say get the bloody game. It's a one-stop shop for all the Quake II goodness you could ever bloody well want. It's got Quake II for N64, people. That's the kind of stuff only true fans care about, and Nightdive put it right in. My overall opinion of remasters and re-releases has changed considerably over the years. But before, I disdained them as I felt mods were better. Today, I realize their importance. It's all well and good to do videos on great games like Quake II, but if you cannot easily play the bloody thing, just talking about it won't do any good. Not everybody wants to mod things or owns a copy of a game they bought when they were 15 years old in 2005. By getting a version like this onto the market for every bloody system, more new fans can experience the greatness of Quake II with zero hassle. You boot up the game and play. No hunting for mods that may or may not work. And while I used to joke about console peasantry, I get it. Not everyone wants to be a PC gamer. So the more real games like Quake II that get released for consoles, the better, as it allows people to see what they've been missing. The bloody wonderful people. Graphically, Quake II looked amazing back in 1997. I was a super fortunate kid and got to play it on my grandfather's epic laptop, and thus I had full graphics. Funny thing is though, when you tried to install Quake II from the disc on a modern PC, the graphics were always downgraded and you had to get a patch to fix them. Thankfully, Nightdive's release has them render right out of the box, and they've even sharpened them a bit, and the whole game looks amazing in 2K. It also runs at 60 FPS, and I was able to switch between keyboard and mouse on the fly. And the game controls excellently with the controller, and you have 2 weapon wheels, one for the guns and one for the power-ups. A tremendous quality of life upgrade to say the least. Sound is great. Everything sounds high quality and lacks the compression one would have gotten without mods. The id Boys really outdid themselves with the sounds. The guns are amazing, especially that Hand of Talos, and the enemies are all distinct. The bastard with the machine gun and grenades always sounds so intimidating. The game had voice acting, and it was remarkably good for its day, and now we got subs to actually understand what they're bloody well saying. Now on to the music. Sonic Mayhem created my single favorite gaming soundtrack of all time. I'll tell thee a tale, lads and lasses. It was the early 2000s. I was a mere teen, and one day I popped in my Quake II disc, and Windows Media Player started playing music from the game CD. I about fell out of my chair when I realized I could rip the music from the game CD. And I've been listening to the Quake II soundtrack ever since. If you thought the original Doom soundtrack was transcendental, think again. Every track on that bloody CD was amazing, but Rage and Descent into Cerberon are 2 of the standouts, with Gravity Well being a close third. This is a soundtrack that you can listen to for your whole bloody life. Quake II remarkably had a story. The game featured an FMV cutscene at the beginning of the game, and that was super bloody impressive back in 1997, and it looks amazing in this re-release. id Software claimed that having a plot in an FPS was like having a plot in a prawn. Well, despite saying that, they sure did a pretty good job of making them, plots that is, not prawn. Truly, what man could play the Doomslayer? And hell, any babe would not be able to satiate his raw fury! Anyway, Doom the prawn parody aside, Quake II teases you with story. When you boot up the game, you see the logo and hear news reports about an alien invasion. In just a few seconds, you learn everything you need to know, and it relies upon your imagination to put it all together. Aliens called the Strogue attacked Earth and kicked the crap out of humanity, but humanity fought hard and defeated the alien menace and are now striking back. No long-winded cutscenes, no info dumps, just a little tease to get those creative juices flowing. You play as a space marine named Bitterman. You get drop-potted onto the Strogue's home planet of Strogos, and you have to try and take them down once and for all. The Strogue are techno-organic monsters that invade worlds for resources both organic and non, and you will find many machines throughout the game making use of, shall we say, human resources. Quake II is often considered just a sci-fi FPS, but it really can be classified as a horror FPS, as id pulled out all the stops, and by using the environment, they made the player feel fear as they saw human bodies being mulched for the Strogue's war machine. As a kid, the cries of the mind-broken Marines were some pretty heavy stuff and creeped me out considerably. It's actually kind of crazy to consider that just a couple years earlier, you just had rather basic action hero stuff. Quake II presents a compelling narrative and one that I would have loved to have seen expanded upon with a novel or two. Quake II would get a direct sequel in 2006 called Quake IV? You see, Quake II was a stopgap title. Originally, it was supposed to have nothing to do with Quake I, but id couldn't come up with anything better, so they added another nail to the Quake logo and called it done. So, Quake III also had nothing to do with Quake I or Quake II, well, other than having Bitterman and Ranger as playable characters. And so, that's the roundabout way that we got Quake IV as a direct sequel to Quake II. And what's worse is that Quake IV ends on a cliffhanger. Yeah, it kind of sucks to be a Quake fan sometimes.
The Quake franchise has been pretty much dead for the last 20 years. But hopefully this remaster of Quake II will shoot up that popularity again, and maybe we might be able to get a Quake V and finish the adventures of Matthew Kane. Until then, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Quake 3 and good Quake Remaster, whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.